Have you ever thought that thousands of years ago, our ancestors signed a contract without foreseeing the consequences? A contract that transformed Homo sapiens from free hunters, living a life of abundance and little worry, into hard-working farmers, sweating in the wheat fields. And in that historic exchange, they accidentally turned wild animals into slaves, bringing about an evolutionary success, but at the same time, a fierce tragedy. This is the true story behind it. The agricultural revolution and the domestication of animals, the greatest deception in human history.
More than 10,000 years ago, our hunter-gatherer ancestors lived a life that was probably more comfortable than we think. They didn't need to work hard, didn't have to worry about diseases spreading from crowded communities, and had a much richer, more varied diet. They were the original affluent societies. So what made them abandon their way of life for a risky revolution? The story we often hear is humans became smarter, discovered the secrets of nature, domesticated plants and animals, and then happily settled down to enjoy a more comfortable life. Instead of us domesticating wheat, perhaps wheat domesticated us. Wheat did not make life easier. On the contrary, it required humans to work harder than ever before. We had to sow, weed, water, and fend off insects. Life became completely dependent on a single plant. But wheat successfully persuaded Homo sapiens to expand their territory and reproduce at a dizzying rate. From an insignificant weed, wheat became the most successful plant in history, thanks to human labor.
Along with the domestication of plants, we began to domesticate animals. It is a tragic story of barter. While dogs were the only animals domesticated before the agricultural revolution for companionship, hunting, and protection, a host of other animals such as cows, goats, sheep, pigs, and chickens were later enslaved to serve human purposes. From an evolutionary perspective, this was a great blessing for these species, as their numbers increased enormously. After Homo sapiens, cows, pigs, and sheep are the most common large mammals on the planet. However, from an individual perspective, this was a tragedy. They suffered from cramped lives, forced breeding, and slaughter. The success in numbers cannot compensate for the suffering of each individual. Harari compares a wild rhinoceros, even though it is in danger of extinction, to being happier than a calf kept in a cage for beef production. This difference between evolutionary success and individual suffering is perhaps the most important lesson we can learn from the agricultural revolution.
This trade-off led to a luxury trap. People believed that working harder would lead to a better life in the future, but in reality, they were trapped in a cycle of endless labor. Populations grew rapidly. Farmers were able to overtake hunter-gatherers by sheer weight of numbers, but they lost their freedom, became dependent on a single food source, and became vulnerable to famine or disease. As villages and towns emerged, societies became more complex. A system was needed to manage large numbers of strangers living together. Spoken language was inadequate to handle problems such as dividing land, recording food supplies, and managing communities. Imaginary orders arose, including religion, law, and pyramidal social structures. However, one of the biggest challenges for early empires and kingdoms was how to maintain and expand their administrative apparatus. They needed a way to gather resources from millions of people. And that is where we come to a new milestone. A tool not for hunting or farming, but for controlling and governing a huge society. That tool became the foundation of every great civilization that followed, and it will be the subject of our next episode. So, the first tax system in human history. How did it come about? And how has it shaped our world? Stay tuned for the next episode.